Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about thinking differently, literally thinking in an outside the box. And we've got a really wonderful guest here that is going to talk to us about this particular subject. He knows how to do this. He's been doing this all his life. And I just so appreciate him. Rich Donovan is the founder of the Return on Disability Group. And he is the author of Unleash Different, which is this book right here. And it's Achieving Business Success Through Disability. He has a fascinating success story. I'll have him explain on that. But he talks about his journey with cerebral palsy and how he came to work with Pepsi, Google, Bank of America, and other leading companies while launching his own index with Barclays. And so, Rich, we're really excited to have you here and sharing your experience and to really dive into a subject that a lot of people, as we were talking about before, is people are afraid to breach. They don't want to talk about it. They don't know how to. They want to understand, but they're afraid of maybe offending somebody in the process. And so I'm just so glad that you're here. Welcome to Leaders of Transformation.
Oh, we're thrilled to be here. Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Oh, and a shout out to Rob Nissen from Nissen PR. He is actually the one who introduced me to Rich. So Rob's been very patient at getting me the information and finally booking this interview. So thank you, Rob, for that. And thank you to our listeners, for tuning in. I mean, you're the reason why we do this podcast. We do this because we want to inspire you. We want to equip you. We want to educate you so that you can be the leader of transformation in your respective area community. Maybe this is an idea. You listen to Rich talking and you go, oh, you know what? I could do this, something very related in your industry. Or maybe it's something completely different. It just opens up the possibility to think in a different way and to not allow yourself to get caught into a box. So we encourage you afterwards. We'd love to hear your stories, your feedback, your comments. Also hear the stories of how you're actually making an impact in the world. We're on social media. I actually have a page on Facebook, the Leaders of Transformation. And I'm always looking for stories to share. So if you have a story to share about how you're actually making an impact, we really want to hear from you. So post it there or share it with me and I'll repost it. That would be awesome. And afterwards, you can go to leadersoftransformation.com. All the links will be there. Also additional resources for you to be able to support you along your journey. Everything's going to be there. And if you like this interview, I often forget to say this, but this is so appreciated from our end. If you like this interview, leave us a rating and review on iTunes. It really does make a difference. We have listeners in over 100 countries, and the greater the reach we get, the more impact we can have. So when you do your ratings, iTunes ranks us higher and more people get to hear it. So we appreciate that support. So Rich, let's just dive in. I mentioned about your company. What exactly do you do with your company? How do you work with these major corporations?
We start with research. So we go analyze 1,500 companies in North America, what they do relative to customers and employees with disabilities. So we go secret shop, we go apply for jobs, we look at marketing material, we look at product development, to look for specific things that companies are doing to delight and attract people with disabilities. And what we do is we tie those activities directly to value creation. So we're not looking for charity work. We're not looking for rubber chicken dinner sites. We're looking for things that actually drive value. How do you actually grow revenue? By delighting people with disabilities. How do you cut costs? By hiring great people with disabilities. That translates into stock prices, which ultimately outperform the market by about 200 basis points a year over the last 7 years.
Wow. Well, there's what I think you said in your book, 1.3 billion people in the world with disabilities.
That's
It's
right.
a huge market.
there's actually new research out last month by CDC that puts that number closer to 2 billion.
Oh,
So
wow.
roughly 25% of the population self-declares as having a disability. So
Wow.
this isn't a niche market, but people think it's small because they think it's all the people in wheelchairs. And the reality is that's only 6% of this market. Most of the market are people with non-visible disabilities, like Richard Branson, who has dyslexia, but uses that dyslexia to become a better entrepreneur.
Yeah, and that's using turning. It's like there. It says in scripture, it says turning it all for good. It's how do I maybe use this setback? And we were talking about that earlier. There's more and more I find. There's probably maybe just because it's social media, we get to see it. It's more visible, but you know, human nature, we have this tendency to make excuses for why we can't do things. And rather than looking at that and saying, okay, well, there's the with the lemon, make lemonade, like, okay, how can I use this either to create more awareness for others and for yourself, or to actually see and do things differently so that which actually makes it even better for everybody.
It's funny. The most successful person in the world is just a person who decides to do something.
Yes.
And we tend to raise these people up on a pedestal like they're some kind of superhuman being. And the reality is they just took a risk and they
Yeah.
decided they were going to do something different than most people, which is get up in the morning, go to work, come home, take care of your family, go to sleep, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's nice. That will never lead to greatness. So, what people with disabilities are very good at is saying, okay, this path may not be available to me. I have to take another path. I have to do something very differently that will allow me to achieve the same result as somebody else, but maybe not the same way as somebody else. And
Yeah.
in that activity is gold because
It's
that's where
actually forcing. Yeah.
innovation, yeah, that's where innovation comes from. Innovation comes from being forced to do something differently. That we can focus on being forced to do something differently, or we can decide to say, hey, I'm going to turn this to my advantage. I'm going to take this and make this part of how I do things and my secret sauce to success. And people with disabilities are really good at doing that.
Yeah, I can start to see how valuable that would be in an organization. You talk about we put people on pedestals. I think one of the reasons why we do that is because it can be like, oh, well, that's them. Like I could never do that. So that it actually gives us, like I was saying about the excuse of the freedom to say, well, yeah, that's not my experience. I don't have that story. Some people actually think they need to have this extraordinary story or huge, setback in their life or something in order for them to launch and do something great. Where somebody might say, you know what, my story's pretty average, and what do I do with that? Right. But everybody has something. And I do believe we all have setbacks in life and we all have opportunities to think differently like that. But like you said, with people that have a, a, a notable disability that doesn't allow them to do the things that are the quote unquote normal, which what's normal? I mean, that's a whole other conversation, right? Like what do we determine as normal? So yeah, talk about some of the things you mentioned about companies. You go in and you help them to mystery shop, which is brilliant to see how they're actually showing up currently, and then look at how you can actually even increase revenues. A lot of times people think that if they're going to hire somebody that maybe is maybe somewhere on that spectrum of autism or something, it's like, oh, well, that's going to be a cost, or that's going to slow us down, or if we have this person. I know there was a lady who was just hired as the first flight attendant, and she had special needs. This is what they were saying, is they were sharing how she always wanted to be a flight attendant, and she just got hired. I forget which was it, United, I think, that hired her. So really, really neat. And they're realizing that, like you said, there's such an opportunity here. So can you unpack a little bit further in terms of how can companies right now, if somebody's listening out there and they have a smaller organization and they're just getting started, they're building up their core values and all of that and how they live that out, or maybe it's a large organization, some business leader that's listening and saying, I never realized it was such a huge market, but we realized we need to do something to be able to support that. And especially now with a conversation about diversity and being more inclusive. Can you talk about how they can do that?
So there's a couple of realities here. So we tend to look at diversity as a moral construct. And the reality is diversity is simply a way to look at demand differently, right? So most companies today structure diversity around some kind of legal mandate or moral conversation. The reality is the typical demand function of the consumer has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, where they expect companies now to serve what we call diversity the way they serve every other customer. So that's the first reason to move is your customer wants you to do it. This isn't about Uncle Sam saying you must do this. This is about the customer saying, if you don't do this, I will go somewhere else. That's the first call to action. The second call to action is there is a gold mine of innovation in thinking differently. Companies today that are mature are so hungry to find 50 basis points of growth, and they just can't find it where they typically found it 20 years ago. So they have to go off the path that they know, and diversity lends itself very nicely to this, specifically disability. Because when you're a disability, you're forced to do things differently, just by the very nature of interacting with the environment. So in that difference, there's a different approach, there's a different process, there's a different set of metrics. And you can apply that process and those metrics to core customers to make their experience easier, better, quicker, cheaper, all of the things that customers care about, right? But you're not going to get there by looking at the core customer. If Henry Ford had have listened to his customer, he would have built a better horse buggy, right? You're never going to invent the next car by asking your core customer what they want. You have to go to the fringes, go to the edges, go to the extreme users of stuff and ask them, hey, what would make this easier for you? What would make you want to come back to my store, use my product, come to my bank, and you can learn from that use case to apply that right to your core customer. And that's basically what we do every day is we talk to customers with disabilities to understand how they use environments, how they would like to be delighted, not just accommodated, but delighted. And then we translate those use cases into core user use cases. So that's where the returns really happen. Is when I can make a car easier to drive for somebody with one arm. I can make that car easier to drive for somebody with two arms, right? Simple conversations like that and simple uncoverings of that, we go much deeper. We go into the complex stuff that we don't share publicly. But that's the ethos of what we do.
So it's interesting that you say that because there's so much talk about uh, the core. You talk about the core customer. So focus on your core customer, focus on the niche, right? Or you're in Canada, your fellow Canadian down the street from where I grew up, which is
Yeah.
really neat. I heard you were talking about that in your book, where you grew up and everything in Newmarket. And I actually grew up down the street there. So niche or niche, depending on which side of the border you're on. Um, most of the time when marketers are talking and strategists are talking about going after your core customer, just serve your core customer. You're actually going in case, we're talking about thinking differently. You're actually going in the face, of that and saying, no, actually, don't right now. Yeah, sure. There's a place to be concerned with your core customer, but you're talking about going on the fringes. I hate to call it fringes, but like that extended network, just say, how can you support them? Very interesting, different approach. So I can see how companies, you can come in with a different conversation than what everybody else is saying when you're going in and working with them. So,
Look, the reality is Google didn't exist 30 years ago. So if companies are going to look for that 2%, 3% marginal growth scale, they're going to put themselves out of existence in 30 years. So great leaders today, great companies, great brands are looking for that parabolic return that's going to get them to the next level of revenue. Right? You're never going to get there asking your core customer whether they want 4 corners on their box or 5. Right? You, in fact, I don't even think they could conceptualize 5 quarters of the box. Right?
yeah.
So you're going to get to that breakthrough innovation by going outside of your comfort zone and
Yeah.
taking risk. The reality is most companies won't do this. They just won't because they like their annual 20% bonus. That's human nature. The husband said, I want to put a pool in, so the wife must earn her 20% bonus. That's human nature. But to be great and to get outside of that and to innovate, you've got to find something outside the core that's going to allow you to leap beyond the 3% growth level
Yeah.
to get to the 5x, the 6x, the 7x that the Googles, the Microsofts, the Apples of the world have figured out. There's a reason why Amazon and Google and Apple are the biggest companies in the world right now. Because they do this every day. It's in their damn DNA. They've all figured out disability is a great driver of innovation. Google's our number 1 company. Apple's our number 2 company. Microsoft is very close behind and they're catching up quickly. These guys have all figured this out. Now the question is, does the online economy catch up?
Mm-hmm.
And they will, or they will go out of business.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. So I think it would be really interesting to hear for you just to touch on your backstory of how you got into this. What was the inspiration for this in terms of you saying, okay, this is the direction I think that rather than, I think there's a lot of, the reason why I say this is there's a lot of people out there who will say something should be done about this. But you went beyond something should be done about this to I'm going to do this. I'm going to build a company. I'm going to get listed. Like there's a whole lot more, and you got to have some real passion behind it to be able to not just change your own life, but to change a lot of other lives. So can you tell us a little bit of your backstory and what led you to this point?
So I spent my former career as a portfolio manager for Merrill Lynch, basically kind of like a hedge fund trader within the bank. And as part of that job, I did recruiting on campus for the next generation of treasurers and bankers. And I figured out going to these events that there was a lot of students coming up to me with disabilities that didn't want to tell anybody, but they would ask me, how the hell did you do this? We want to learn from you. And these students were the best in their class, but they were dealing with this issue that they were hiding. And as a company, Merrill Lynch could swoop in and pick them up and get great talent. So we started on the talent side, and I was very successful. We started a nonprofit called Lime that went out to campuses across North America with Google, Microsoft, Pepsi, Merrill Lynch, Goldman Sachs, and it's still going gangbusters today. But I started to realize that most of the value was actually on the customer side. And getting this right with the customer could lead to things like 25, 35% revenue growth if you got it right. And as a trader, you don't come across opportunities like that ever, especially not with 1.3 billion people in the world, right? So it started to nag at me that this is probably the best trade I would ever see, and I was uniquely qualified to go after it, having the background I had. So when 2008 came around and the Great Recession started to happen, I realized I would never get a better chance to jump ship and go start my own shop. So did that, worked with Pepsi for probably 3 years on our models and our metrics and getting this right from an internal perspective, making sure that senior executives would support this from a return perspective, and then realized, wait a second, we can apply this to every country, every company in the world, and ran it through the S&P 500. And lo and behold, the best companies beat the market by 200 basis with the same risk in the market. As a trader, you never see that. That's not supposed to be possible, right? So, uh, after I did that research, it was go time. And here we are 10 years later, we're talking to some of the biggest governments in the world, we're working with some of the biggest brands in the world, we're out there speaking to people with disabilities on a daily basis, asking them what they want in their experiences, in their product design, in their packaging. Not simple things like, would you like a door that opens? Yes, most people do. We're actually getting into the nitty gritty, like what would make you buy more of this? What are the things that make you um, want to pay 20% more per product, like coffee, simply by changing the packaging, right? That's not supposed to be possible. You're not supposed to be able to charge 20% more per coffee. It's a commodity. But if you change the packaging, people will pay more per coffee. So those are the kinds of things that we look for, that we help our clients figure out and actually put product on shelves that will result in a revenue boost immediately to the top and bottom lines.
Brilliant. I just, I'm thinking about a lot of times people say, I want to make a difference. I want to do something that helps people. And so they go into the nonprofit space a lot.
Right.
Like we're on the leaders, this is the leaders of transformation, right? It's like people say, I want to make a difference.
Right.
And so we get the people, I need to do that through a nonprofit. Or yeah, we certainly have a lot of leadership consultants and CEOs and people that are on our show as well, and people that make a difference on all different levels. But what you're talking about here is, talk about, like you said, it's like this doesn't happen. You saw such an opportunity. But what's interesting is also that you saw it through the financial markets, which is not necessarily one of those let's go out and help a bunch of people industry. Most people see it, the Wall Streets, right? They see that as being strictly profit driven. You actually took that and said, okay, so yeah, let's talk about that. And
What
actually, right, yes, go ahead.
the reality is, companies don't change if it's not in their best interest.
Right.
So,
So you presented it to them and said, yeah, you actually do want to do this because
so
it's going to be profitable.
but rather than fight that reality, you
Yes.
want to harness that reality. You want to make it work for you. You want it to pull you forward rather than
Yes.
bash your head against it, right? So
Yes.
that was an easy realization very quickly. Companies told us, look, we'd love to do this, but show me the money. Right?
Yeah.
Show me why I'm not gonna just cut you a check for 50,000, but I'm gonna go spend $500 million to do this right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get a return of 2 billion, right? So
Yeah.
that's the conversation you want to have. You don't want to have a rubber chicken conversation where everybody goes to a dinner and they walk away with smiles on their face. They wake up in the morning and they go back to the real world, right? The real world is about profit, it's about growth, it's about driving value for shareholders. And the good thing is, this market's big enough, it's strong enough, it's pervasive enough, it's got enough disposable income that it can stand on its own merit.
Yeah.
When you combine people with disabilities and their friends and family, you're talking about 53% of the world.
Wow.
Let that take in for a second, right?
Yeah.
Everyone thinks this is some niche of wheelchair users. It's not. It's a
Yeah.
pervasive market. It's the second largest market in the world behind women.
Wow.
Right?
That's amazing. Yeah.
That's statistics, right? That data. That's nice. It's good to know it's big, but what do you do with that, right? What do you?
Yeah.
So what? And I guess that's the answer that we give our clients is, how do I capture this? Companies understand it's big, they understand there's an opportunity, but they don't know how the hell to get at it. And that's essentially the question that we answer for them.
Yeah. That is awesome. Wow. We could talk about funding your project and some of the ways that you did that. I have a whole list of questions here that I had kind of thought through. One of the things that really does stand out, and I touched on it before with you prior to this, that I did think that we needed to address is shifting gears a moment, is this idea, which I actually heard the term only recently, and that may be just my ignorance and not in my space that's just shown up or that I've noticed it, but it's this term of inspiration porn. And somebody, Steve Andrew, used it recently and said that, people with disabilities don't appreciate when they're like, oh, you're such an inspiration. That's actually not necessarily a compliment to them. Can you talk about that? I know most people would avoid it and going, oh, we were talking about the beginning. They're just going to avoid the conversation because they don't know what to deal with it because they don't want to offend anybody. But I think it's important because there's a lot of people who want to understand how, because it's like people say, oh, I know how you feel. It's like when somebody passes away and they say, I know how you feel. No, you don't. You don't know how I feel unless you can't know how I feel, right? So we literally, cannot know how someone else is for sure going to take something. And we may have intended it in a certain way,
Right.
but that's, it's like Tony Robbins says, communication is the response you get. So talk a little bit about that. Where's the line between, I see anybody that is overcoming a situation or something that could be perceived as a challenge that is chosen to turn that into an opportunity or turn that into, hey, you know what? life happens. This is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm working with, and I'm going to make the best of it. To me, that's inspirational to me. But it can also, as I said, it can also offend, and we don't want to go cross that line. So can you maybe just expand on that?
So the first thing I would say is don't worry about offending people. If you're an honest individual who just wants to learn, ask a question, right? You
Yeah.
may come across a person who gets offended by that question. That's not a person who will tell you the truth anyway, so don't worry about that, right? Just
Yes.
ask the question. Inspiration point is rooted in the concept of a definition of success, right? So if the the brand of disability that's been built over the last 45 years has been disability basically equals a death sentence, right? You won't be able to do X, Y, Z. You're not going to be a productive member of society. You won't be able to do the things that everybody takes for granted, which we now know is total BS, right?
Yeah.
However, there's still some pockets of society that doesn't quite get that. That says, oh, look at that 5-year-old boy with a disability walking 22 feet, right?
Mm,
So
I
what?
see.
So he's walking 22 feet. What is the real benchmark of success for that 5-year-old? Is that 5-year-old going to grow up to be the next president of the United States? Maybe,
Yeah.
but most people wouldn't think to go there, right? So is the success walking 22 feet, or is the success being president of the United States? It's probably
Yes.
it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? So, but most people today still get stuck at that 22 feet. And that's where inspiration point tends to live, at
Mm,
that end of that spectrum, right? So the expectation of people with disabilities, for the most part, is still far below where it needs to be. And that's why people with disabilities push back pretty hard on this concept of don't think of my walking 22 feet as an inspiration.
yes.
Now, now if you go and get cancer and you think that you did that with a disability, there are probably more challenges facing you than most people, and you're inspired by that. Great.
Yeah.
But let's make sure that the goal or the achievement is real, right?
Yes. Oh,
That's
that's
what,
that's a great distinction. Yeah.
right.
It's interesting in your book you talk about your parents. I was fast. Let me see if I actually can quickly find it because I highlighted it. There were some things that you had people say some pretty nasty things to you. And oftentimes we hear, what did you, so something happened to you and your mom said, Rich, you're going to have to deal with that kind of thing the rest of your life. You're going to run into people like that. So how are you going to handle it? And, it was a different approach than a lot of times people, your dad said, look, Rich, if you want to be on top, you had better get used to people trying to knock you off, because that's what happens when you change people's realities. You've got two choices. You either develop a thicker skin or let the stuff bounce off of you, or you can live in misery. And I mean, so you had a gift in two parents that really did set the expectation of not treating you so differently. Like you said, they didn't treat you differently than your brother Mike.
Right.
It reminds me of a guy, his name was Bubba Pratt. Years ago, I heard him speak, and he shared this story, so that's why I'm using his real name. He talks about going into the principal's office with his child, and they had done an assessment, and they said, "Well, your child has ADHD."
Right.
And he's like, "Okay," and so they said, "Well, what does that mean?" right? What do we do with that, right?
Yeah.
And so the principal turns to him and said, well, what do you do with it? And he said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, you have it. And he said, I do. And apparently, I think this, he was like, he had gone to that school when he was young and he had been assessed. But the difference is that when he went home and his mother said, well, this is what they told me. They told us that you were a very, very smart child.
Yeah.
Right? They told you that they so basically what they did is they turned it around. Parents didn't tell him that there was a problem.
Right.
And so he never understood that there was a problem. And so then he didn't operate as though there was a problem. So he didn't lower the bar, put it this way. He didn't lower the bar. He knew he had certain challenges that he had to deal with in terms of focus, but he actually didn't lower the bar for himself, and his parents didn't lower the bar for him. And he actually became, as he was sitting in that principal's office with his child, he was a multimillionaire, super, super successful. And he's like, oh, there's something, like I didn't even know. Nobody told me.
Do you know what the common denominator is between my story and Bubba's story?
What?
Nobody looked at disability as a problem,
Yes.
right? And this is essentially where we are in society, where we're starting to shift from disability being a problem to disability being either part of the human reality
Yes.
or actually an asset, right?
Yes.
I use it as an asset every day of my damn life, right? That's the way it is. You can make a choice as a person to say, damn it, I got this problem, I got to carry with me through life. Or you can make a decision to say, this is real, I need to deal, I need to move forward, and I need to find a way to turn this into my advantage. And
Yes.
for some people, that it took, for me, it took me 20 years to figure that out, right?
Yeah.
So it's not as simple, but everybody's a different individual, they're dealing with different assets, they're dealing with different mindsets, different influences, but the common denominator is society sees these things as problems.
Yes.
And when we get beyond that, and when we get into this as an asset conversation, that's where things dramatically shift. I guarantee you nobody thought an 8-year-old kid in Toronto with CP would go be a trader at Wall Street.
Yeah.
But imagine if they did.
Yeah.
Right? What would happen? What would have been the result of the millions of kids today
Yeah.
who are in the world who are not expected to do anything because they have a disability? I'll give you a story. I had the opportunity when I was at Merrill to be principal for a day at a New York City school. And we were at this table at the school. There was a 16-year-old kid at the table who used the wheelchair. And we were talking about careers and what you wanted to be when you grew up. And the conversation got to this guy, Javier is his name. I said, Javier, what do you want to do when you get into high school? What does your career look like? And he hemmed and hawed, and I pushed him pretty hard. I said, you gotta give me an answer. And he said, nobody's ever asked him that question before.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? A 16-year-old kid, obviously very bright, very motivated, having a great conversation with the table, and nobody's ever asked him what he wanted to be when he grows up.
It's like a
Difficult.
death sentence. It's like a
It
death
is.
sentence as a kid because the kid doesn't know any different. You just put a ceiling, a lid on their potential. Oh, okay. Well, I guess that's the
And
way it is.
it's not
Wow.
intentional.
The
It's not.
missed opportunity, the missed talent.
Oh,
Ugh.
the value that we've wasted over the last 50, 60, 80 years, even today, we're still not there yet. And that's why this work excites me, is the value that we have yet to unlock in society because we don't value disability as a trade here. I look at that as my eyes bug out. It's just enormous. And we're gonna get there. It's going to happen. It's just a question of does it take 5 years or does it take 50 years?
Yeah.
And I think we're closer to 5 than 50, but boy, there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, well, and that's what you're here for. That's what you're doing,
That's right.
and to bring that closer. So your website, unleashdifferent.com,
Yep.
is where they can get the book. They can find out more about you. You work with major corporations. Do you also work with larger companies? Do you have maybe talk a little bit about what's available, who you can work with? Because I'm sure there's people at companies that are the Fortune 500 companies, but there's also people that have smaller companies and want to know how can they learn about what you're doing and apply that in their own company.
Any company that faces a retail consumer should be doing this. Whether it's your direct customer or your end user, you got to be looking at this stuff because if you're not, your competition is going to crush you. And wait till governments figure this out. Governments have been looking at this from a compliance perspective. They're just starting to realize, geez, we can transform our infrastructure based on ease of use. We can transform every government experience based on ease of use. People with disabilities have it figured out already. We just gotta harness it, right? So if
Yeah.
you're facing that end user in any capacity and you're designing experiences for the general population, you need to understand this stuff. It can be simple as a mom and pop grocer, just understanding what it takes to get people in and out of their store and communicate efficiently with people. It doesn't have to be a major overhaul, right? This most of the stuff is relatively capital efficient, right? People think, oh no, I gotta retrofit my entire real estate portfolio. I need to change all my procedures. No, you need to listen to what your customer wants
Yeah.
and deliver that, right? So if you're a company, larger company, who's doing product development, who's doing breakthrough design, or thinks they're doing breakthrough design, and you're not looking at disability, you're leaving value on the table at best, and at worst, you're doing bad design. And I think that's the realization I made in the last 3 or 4 years is there's gold that even I haven't discovered yet. Every time we talk to people, we learn something new. We incorporate that in our design process, and man, is it powerful. And the great thing is, it makes money.
Yeah.
Any self-interested capitalist should want to do this, right?
Yeah.
This isn't charity. This isn't something that is nice to do. This drives returns.
Yeah.
And what we haven't talked about is aging society. Boomers are the wealthiest generation in human history. And when
Yeah.
you reach the age 65, 52% of people above 65 have at least one disability. They may not call it a disability, but functionally it's exactly the same. So as these guys age and they travel, they buy stuff, how are you gonna deal with that disability functionality to delight that customer?
Yeah.
That's where the real growth is gonna come in the next 20 years. And probably it's what fixes this. Right?
Yeah. You know what? I am so glad that you, like you said, you were positioned with your background and expertise. You are like the perfect person to, to lead this. And I know you have a huge team that helps you to do this, but you're the perfect person to do this because you understand how to talk to business, like you said, the capitalist, and saying, hey, this makes money, and you understand both sides. I mean, it's fantastic. So for our listeners, I would encourage you, go get a copy of Rich's book, Unleash Different. When it first came in, and I get a lot of books from people that are on my show, and of course books that I want to read and so forth, but this really jumped out at me, and I was like, "Ooh, I want to read this one." And as I said, I get a lot of books, and a lot of great books, not just average books, but really, really awesome books. But this one stood out for me as one to read, and it's excellent. And he shares his story in there, and but there's so much wisdom and nuggets in there. And then, find out more about how you can apply what Rich is talking about in your company, whether it's a small company, whether it's a large company. There's a huge opportunity here. And if you don't take advantage of it, you're going to miss out, and you may not be in business for long. So, because this is the way it's going. Highly encourage you to do that. Rich, thank you for being here and sharing just a taste of your passion. I can tell that you wake up in the morning on a mission every morning.
It's the only way to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. It is. And our leaders of transformation, I always say, take action on something. As I said, whether it's buying his book, going to his website, finding more about this, doing some of your own investigation, even in your own organization. Ask and find out. If you're a CEO, find out and saying, what are we actually doing? How much, where in the conversation is this coming up? Not just from a regulatory standpoint or obligation. Oh, we've got to institute this policy or that policy, but really actually being curious and seeing it as an asset, seeing it as an opportunity to think differently. Maybe that's a place to start, but start somewhere, because nothing happens until you take action. So I encourage you that. Love to hear your stories. And thank you for being here with us today. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.